Everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bound to Talk Football. I am your host, Blake Walker. I am alone tonight here on this morning or this afternoon or tonight's episode, whenever you are listening in. My co-host, Paul Urge, has big test tomorrow, as in Monday morning. I'm recording this on Sunday evening, so he could not make the podcast tonight, but we like to get these out Monday morning. That way people just have good recaps when we start our week for football and get you ready for the playoffs as well. I think we're going to roll with 2 episodes here. Paul's just getting busier here as the semester rolls on as expected. So we're probably just going to have your standard recap and then probably preview / midweek episode for the most part. So I basically, all the stuff that I'm looking at will be off my phone. Plus I have the other stuff. We'll go over the playoffs. We'll go over the RPI, all of it. I'll talk about today because there's a lot to go over. Obviously, the RPI is out, so I kind of have to talk about the playoffs. So this might be a big episode. I won't go deep into detail when I talk about the games that are in the playoffs here. I'll save that when Paul and I are back together here on Thursday or whatever, or Friday. But I just want to be able to read them off. So good, fun week 9 of action. In terms of playoffs, there wasn't a lot of upsets per se, but there were some incredible games. I'll talk about those here as the pod goes on. 5A, 4A, 3A, got down to it. The RPI, there were a couple shockers in the RPI. A couple, there were a couple upsets that cost RPI spots. So that was definitely one of the things that caught a lot of people off guard. But yeah, it was one of those type of weeks that we're going to look back on and say, dang, would have, could have, should have for a lot of teams. And a lot of teams will look back on their season and be more what could have, should have. And that's unfortunately just how it's going to go for the most part. You just have to set yourself up and put yourself in a good position at the end of the day. And some teams learned RPI wise that it's tougher than it seems. And we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, I look rough. I can tell you that right now. Today was a very slow day for me. I was at the Iowa game yesterday. And if you know anything about football and heard about the Iowa game yesterday, that was about the worst possible thing that I could have ever witnessed. It's a good thing Paul's not here because he's a Minnesota fan. So I wouldn't have even wanted to look him in the face anyway. But yeah, if my voice sounds dead, it's because it is dead. Because for a minute, I thought I had just witnessed the greatest play ever by former OAB CIG star Cooper DeJean. And then it was taken away from me, and I have never been the same since. So it's been in a very depressed mood all day. But we're going to roll on here with high school football. We'll start out with the recapping of this past week of games. We'll start in Class 5A like we always do. Our game of the week, Iowa City High takes down Bettendorf. 42-21 is the final score. Obviously, Iowa City High was very happy with our boy Jack Whitmore on our staff. Jack was the only person that picked Iowa City High. The rest of us picked Bettendorf. I cannot believe this game. I can, but I didn't think it was going to be this big. 42-21, Bettendorf's second loss of the season. Bobby Bacon just showed up. I mean, he wasn't even the starter at the beginning of the year, and he's jumped in and he's taken over. 18 of 31, 336 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, just a huge difference maker. Miles Parlett, 28 carries, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. Sam Cater, 8 tackles, 1.5 for loss, 1 sack. I mean, this was just a dominating performance by Iowa City High. 351 passing yards total, 156 yards on the ground. I mean, they utterly dominated Bettendorf. It was a 20-0 lead. It was 28-0 at halftime. And then by then, Bettendorf was already counted at the back. So what a game for Iowa City High to go on the road and make that big time play and really improve your RPI, because based on the RPI, I don't know if they would have gotten in. It was going to be really close, and I think they knew that. So their backs up were against the wall, and Iowa City High makes an incredible game plan. And it's so crazy because when I talk about it later, they literally play each other this week, which that's the tough part about, the bracket. Of course, sometimes it works out like that. But guess what? You got to play them again this week. So I'll talk about that briefly when we go over our next ones, because there's a couple games that are repeats, which, it stinks, but what are you going to do? There's just 16 teams, and a lot of them usually play the top. So it is what it is, I guess, but a heck of a win for Coach Moore and his team, Iowa City High. defeat Bettendorf, their second loss of the season. I don't think you want to panic yet if you're Bettendorf, but it's definitely like oh, dang, we just got smoked, and now we have to play the team again that we just got smoked by, which in a way could help Bettendorf. But I want to talk about it with Paul on Thursday. What can change in a week? Like, what can you look on film and be like, okay, we got beat by 21 points. How do we make up 21 points? I know they turned the ball over a couple times, but that's another big one. I don't know. It's going to be a tough week of practice for Bettendorf to try to shape back up. And if you're Iowa City High, you cannot get too high on yourself. Buckle down, get back. You're going to get going again. Johnston goes up to Sioux City East and takes care of the Black Raiders, 48-13. Johnston snags win number 5 on the year. Sioux City East drops to their 4th loss on the year. Only Johnston has stats in for this game. Will Nuss, 13 of 21, 188 yards and 2 touchdowns. D'Angelo Barku, 17 carries, 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jacob Simpson really was the big one that had the day. 6 catches, 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. 209 yards passing total, and rushing yards only 80 pretty much on the ground unofficially for Johnston. Big third quarter. They were up. What were they up by? They were up 24-0 at halftime, and then they scored 24 points in the third quarter and pulled away. This is the Johnston team that everybody's scared of. I mean, this is a difficult team. If their defense is off and running, their offense got going. Will Nuss made a couple big throws. I was able to watch the first half of this one just a little bit. I had to crank my TV volume all the way to 60. I felt like the broadcast was so quiet. But Johnston takes care of business, and are they the hottest team going into the postseason? Maybe. I mean, only lost to Southeast Polk by 3. You lose to Waukee off a fumble that was taken back for 6 with less than a minute to go. You lose a close one to Ankeny, who you have to play again. We'll talk about that. I mean, this Johnston team could easily only have 1 loss right now, and that's just how they set it up. Sioux City East, it's not easy as they head into the postseason. We'll talk about who they play, which isn't a great draw for them, but they got lucky, and they still were able to sneak into the postseason at 11th, or snuck in, were 11th, fell back, but we're still able to hold on. So good win for Johnston. The Dragons advance on to the postseason. Cedar Rapids Prairie takes down Iowa City West 45-38. This was a must win. Winner of this game got in. What a wild game. Prairie was up 28-8 at halftime. Iowa City West rallies all the way back, but can't get the job done. They think they trailed 45-31. They scored late, couldn't get the onside kick. Jack Wallace tried everything he could. 27 of 44, 458 yards, 3 touchdowns in the air, 47 yards carrying on the ground, 1 touchdown. The thing is, for Prairie, their rushing attack is what's got it done. Casey Kelly, 27 carries, 266 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Also, Colin Velke, 16.5 tackles, 1 sack, and 1 fumble recovery. So Prairie's defense, despite giving up 38 points, came up big in the end just to try to hold off Iowa City West. I mean, the passing attack, I mean, that's just insane. 458 passing yards for Wallace, but the ground attack clearly works. City West just didn't quite have the defense that was necessary to win a ball game. You just can't give up 298 yards on the ground and expect to win. And Prairie, they set themselves up interesting for the postseason, but if they're not running well, then they're not good at all because the passing attack is not good enough to get them there. They have weapons with Apollo Payne and such, but they have to step up big and make big plays all across the board. So good win for Prairie. Good to get into the postseason. It was probably a playoff type atmosphere, but a big, big win for the boys to get themselves in, and they'll set their sights on the postseason. Ankeny Centennial took on Urbandale. Technically was a win in your in type game. Centennial goes into the playoffs at 5-4. Urbandale is 4-5. Centennial led 21-0 at halftime. That pretty much set the tone for this one. Trenton Smith had a good day. 14 of 18, 218 yards and 2 touchdowns. Elijah Porter, 16 carries, 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really the best you could have asked for. I mean, Centennial, this is the Centennial that everybody's scared to see if this Centennial shows up in the playoffs. Or you'll get the one that we saw against Waukee Northwest that just couldn't get anything going. They can score. There's no doubt about that. But the defense has to step up big, and their offense just has to make sure they're making plays. And this is the type of game you want from Trenton Smith and Elijah Porter. Max Snyder had 7 catches for 101 yards. This is exactly what you want from Ankeny Centennial, and you got to keep that up. Urbandale was only held to 88 passing yards and 75 rushing yards. If Centennial can keep the balanced attack going, which they do, I think they have one of the most balanced rushing and passing attacks in the state. They're going to be just fine. Urbandale finishes the year at 4-5, but Jalen Brooks, their running back, a junior, Maxwell Hartzell, a junior wide receiver, and then Landon Rennan, freshman quarterback. So the future is bright for Urbandale. Expect the Jayhawks to get things rolling here at least next year or the next. So the future is bright for Urbandale, but a 4-5 record, nothing to hang your hat on, that's for sure. Cedar Falls takes on Davenport West. Another almost probably would have been a play and win game. I think Cedar Falls maybe could have afforded to lose this one, but they take down Davenport West 47-28. How about Davenport West, man? I mean, last year went undefeated, started early, lost, went to the playoffs, but they just weren't good. This year, a little bit tougher of a schedule, and they actually played well. A 5-4 record. They just miss out on the postseason, but it's nothing to be ashamed of. They were phenomenal all season. And Cedar Falls starts to gain momentum, and they've already been gaining momentum, but now they're starting to look like the team that we thought they could be. Tate Hermanson, 8 of 14, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. Drake Gelhaus, 163 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Drew Gertis, 6.5 tackles. I mean, this is the team that we expect Cedar Falls to be when I picked them at the beginning of the year to be one of the better teams in the class, and now they're starting to look like it. You got a win against Kennedy a couple weeks ago, and now you get the win against Davenport West. You play Kennedy again this week. Again, another repeat, but nonetheless, a huge, huge win for Cedar Falls. And they look to be, I mean, there's a couple out east, and I'll talk about the next one, but Cedar Falls looks like they are not a team to be messed with. That is for sure. Last one in Class 5A I want to talk about. Pleasant Valley takes down Linmar 28-14. This is the problem with PV, is that this one they were good, but it wasn't like a blow your socks off type good. Linmar scored the first score of the game, and then it was PV the rest of the way. 14 in the second, 7 in the third, 7 in the fourth, leads to a 28-7 victory. Coy Kipper, 97 carries, 3 touchdowns. He was 4 of 6 for 44 yards. They clearly don't pass the ball. Coy Kipper, 97 carries, 3 touchdowns, like I just said. Harrison Fierce, 5.5 tackles, 1 fumble recovery. This game wasn't pretty. 267 yards for Pleasant Valley on the ground, 162 for Linmar. Linmar actually passed the ball well, 133 yards, 2 picks and 2 touchdowns and a pick. But PV gets it done. But Linmar, who came into this game at the 15th spot in the RPI, everyone's like, okay, if Linmar loses, they're out. Linmar did not miss it. Linmar made it at the 16th seed, and it got into the playoffs at 4-5. And I'm sure if you're a Davenport West fan, you're not happy about it. But Linmar just played a tough enough schedule, and they get a rematch with Southeast Polk, which they've played it feels like so many times in the last couple of years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like Linmar and Southeast Polk just always seem to meet in the playoffs recently. But nonetheless, a huge win for Pleasant Valley, and statistically, RPI-wise, look like the team to beat out east. But they get a tough challenge in round 1, and we'll talk about that. I just wanted to quickly gloss over it. Valley defeated Marshalltown. Valley got into the playoffs. We'll talk about it later. We'll jump on to Class 4A. North Polk takes down ADM 28-17. It's time to talk about North Polk as a possible state championship team, because this is the team that you expect. Reggie Postel really didn't have to do much. 4 of 7, 76 yards. BJ Tate, 25 carries, 117 yards. They still kind of run that, double quarterback system over there at North Polk, but their defense is what stepped up. 11.5 tackles, 2.5 for loss for Kahan Torres. Aiden Flora did play for ADM, but it looks like he was limited just a little bit, but he still tried all he had. 12 of 18 in the air, 181 yards and 1 touchdown, 73 yards rushing and a touchdown. Zach Lohman was another tailback, it looks like. Boy, he carried the load. 25 carries, 80 yards, 9 catches, and a touchdown. Rylan Stein Smith, a senior, had 7 receptions, 112 yards, no touchdowns. It's a tough loss for ADM, because now we wonder what team are we getting in the postseason, because we've seen ADM be very good when Aiden is playing. Obviously, they're phenomenal if they're both playing, Aiden and Brevin Dahl. Brevin's not coming back. And Aiden Flora, we don't know, is he fully healthy? I read an article before this game because I was trying to figure out, I'm like, who am I going to pick? I was trying to figure out, I'm like, is Aiden going to play? And an article I read, it was like a semi-healthy Aiden Flora. And I'm like, you almost need a fully healthy Aiden Flora. He's that good, but it's just like, they've slipped here late, and now they're an 8 seed going into the postseason. They still get home field advantage. I think they got a pretty good draw. I'll talk about that later, but North Polk just gets the job done. I mean, they were good in all facets of the game. Their defense is solid, and I think that's something that a lot of people push past them. Their only loss is to Webster City and Ballard, and against Webster City, they didn't really give up many points, and then Ballard, they only lost 7-6. So if the offense can roll, North Polk's a good team because that defense can get the load done. ADM, you're just like, can we just get fully healthy? That's what ADM needs. It's a tough loss for the Tigers. But North Polk, district champions, which I don't think many people would have said that was going to happen here at the beginning of the season, but that's just kind of how things worked out. Glenwood defeats Norwalk 53-35. Glenwood, 3-game winning streak going into the postseason. It hasn't looked pretty at times. The defense has given up quite a few points, but they're working hard. This thing was 14-14 at the end of the first quarter. Glenwood pulls away late. Boy, Aiden Harder, 427 yards, 4 touchdowns. It's just not enough. Caden Anderson, 11 of 19, 148 yards and a touchdown. Kellen Scott, the tailback, he was the big difference maker. 219 yards and 3 touchdowns for him. He also had 6.5 tackles, which led the team. Glenwood rushes officially for 375 yards. They pass for 148. Norwalk only runs for 68 yards. Norwalk's defense has been the big question mark. I mean, that they've just given up a couple big-time plays, a couple big-time moments. Glenwood's interesting. I mean, they're a top 5 team. You can take them as they will or take them as you will. I'm just very curious what people think about Glenwood. I think they're a great team. They've clearly earned it. 3-game winning streak here in a pretty tough district. But it's like, how good is this team really? How far can Glenwood get? I think they're capable of the dome. It just feels like everything's got to work together. But giving up 35 points, not ideal either. But we've seen teams give up points before this season and have turned out to be just fine. So, again, take it as you will, but we'll see what happens in the long run. Bondurant defeats Carlisle 42-27, and it was no Titus Cram, but Bondurant did not care. Jordan Ryle, the backup quarterback, 11 of 21, 172 yards and a touchdown. It's Caleb Moore who stepped up. No Titus Cram, so Caleb Moore steps up. Literally did what Titus Cram usually does. 28 carries, 213 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then on defense, he had 11 tackles, 7 of them for loss, and 2.5 sacks. So Caleb Moore said, okay, Titus, you're hurt. I'll just become you. And that's exactly what Caleb Moore did. Man, what an effort. I mean, my goodness. Caleb Moore, shout out to you, man. 296 yards on the ground total for Bondurant, 172 in the air. They did throw 2 interceptions. That's, a downside of a quarterback that's just jumping into it. It's really interesting about Bondurant, man. It's really interesting. How do they look in the playoffs? Again, we get another repeat game between them and Pella, and we'll talk about that. But they're just an interesting team, man. They are so interesting because now they've lost their 2 guys. They've lost their quarterback and the running back, but they're still pretty good. It's just a matter of how good can they be, So we'll see what Bondurant's got up their sleeve, but a 42-7 win over Carlisle, they will take that all day, every day, and a much-needed victory for the Blue Jays as they go into the postseason. Pella defeats Gilbert 33-23. Gilbert will finish the year at 6-3. They miss out on the postseason after losing their last 3 games of the year. Pella 6-3. They are into the postseason with the win. This game was insane. I watched the whole thing on YouTube. Gilbert got up 16-0, and you're like, oh my gosh, like Gilbert came to play. And it sounded like it was an amazing playoff atmosphere based off the live stream. And then Pella just slowly chipped back away. And Luke Hardman might need an all-state vote. I mean, this kid's unbelievable. 171 yards passing, no touchdowns, but he runs for 172 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. The man literally carried Pella to a victory. And the Dutch pull away late. They scored 13 in the fourth quarter. Gilbert with long possessions in this game. I think one possession almost went 10 minutes, I think, for Gilbert. Will Hawthorne did all he could, 19 carries, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 10 tackles, 1 for loss, and 1 sack. It just wasn't enough. Gilbert still ran for the same amount of yards as Pella, 214, and then passing, they just got beat, 69 yards passing, 1 interception. It's a tough end of the season for Gilbert, and I was listening to the broadcaster say it at the end of the game. there's nothing to hang your hat on. It's nothing. Your schedule was loaded at the back half. Not saying that would have changed anything because you still, even if you played them early, it wouldn't have mattered. But this is a team that only won one game last year and could have won 6 games last year based off their schedule. It's so many one-score games. And here, late, it's just, their schedule just didn't give them any favors. You don't know what teams are going to be like when you schedule them sometimes. You just don't. But the schedule just hurt them, simply. They miss it at 6-3 because their wins just weren't enough against quality opponents, and their losses came to the best teams that they faced, and the RPI just kicked them out. So it's a very tough loss for Gilbert. I hurt for them. I hate that the comments that people would give to them saying that they were a fraudulent program. It takes a lot to win 6 games. Most teams would love to have 6 wins in a season. It just so happens that they just couldn't get that win in the last couple of weeks. And I know they were disappointed, but there's nothing to be disappointed about. I think this was a good season for Gilbert, and they're young. I mean, all these guys, Connor Rash and Will Hawthorne, are both juniors. So they expect Gilbert to come back strong. It's the same schedule next year. Just flip it home and away. Go out, win one of these last 3 games, take care of business in the first 6 like you did. But now you circle Pella, Newton, Bondurant, circle those games, and you come back even stronger. If Gilbert does that, I think they're going to be just fine, and we could be looking at a Gilbert Tiger playoff team next year. But good on the Pella Dutch, who look to be one of the hottest teams, one of the weirder hottest teams going into the postseason if you're looking at consistency. We'll jump down to Class 3A, where Algona defeats Hampton-Dumont Cal 21-7. Algona got up 7-0 in the first quarter, and then a kick return touchdown. On the very first kickoff return of the second half, Algona took all the way back to the house. I also watched this game. Algona defeats Hampton-Dumont Cal 21-7. Alec Mensky just didn't have a great game. 8 of 15, 50 yards and a touchdown. It was Evan Alley, the sophomore running back. 9 carries, 96 yards and a touchdown. Tate Slagle, 7.5 tackles on the back end. This was a ugly game, if you will. Both teams only passed for 50 and 55 yards. Algona outrushed Hampton-Dumont Cal 174 yards to 149. Hampton-Dumont Cal had 1 interception. And then the big thing was Algona probably could have won this game by more. They fumbled the ball twice, like in pretty good positions. And Hampton-Dumont Cal just came up big. But the Bulldogs defense, Hampton-Dumont Cal defense, just couldn't get the stops when it was necessary late. They're a good team. I think the win over Nevada was huge. But after the win against Nevada, it was just like, they just kind of were stepping. They were trying to keep it going. But, dude, they played in like the toughest district in the state. I mean, that's going to be tough anyway. They're a pretty senior-heavy team. They do have a sophomore, Brody Struthers. He's going to be pretty good for the next couple of years. Good to see him make plays on Friday night. But tough end of the season for Hampton-Dumont Cal. I think they lost their last 4 out of their last 5, 3 out of their last 4, something like that. Just kind of cost them. Algona sneaks in with, a pretty solid team, but definitely some question marks as you go into the postseason. I think they're going to be fun. They're going to be fun to watch. Alex is only a junior, and obviously Evan Alley is only a sophomore. But, just kind of one of those games that you sneak in. It sucks that somebody had to lose this game at the end of the day. Bishop Heelan crushes MOC Floyd Valley, 62-27. This game was for a playoff spot for MOC Floyd Valley. They were 17th on the outside looking in, and Bishop Heelan, I might be all aboard the Bishop Heelan train, because back when Grinnell made it to the playoff, the Dome back in like 2012, something like that, Bishop Heelan was the team. I think it was Heelan versus Decorah, I think, somewhere around there, because Josie Jewell was on that Decorah team. Whatever. This is looking like old Bishop Heelan. I mean, looking at some of the videos from this game, these guys run the triple option like no other. They go under center. They do this classic game. MOC Floyd Valley tried everything they could. Blake Albers, 326 yards passing and 4 touchdowns, but the rushing attack was just way too much. And the passing attack. Quinn Olson. We need to be talking about Quinn Olson. The senior quarterback, 10 of 13, 214 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and then he ran for 101 yards and 1 touchdown. Sir Brandon Watts, 7 catches, 173 yards, 3 touchdowns. They ran for 246 yards, and they passed for 214 yards. If you do that, you're going to win ball games. There's nothing else to say about that. They also picked off Albers twice. Just a dominating win by Bishop Heelan. who going into week 9, I'm like, I don't know about this team, man. I picked MLC Flood Valley to win this game because I was like, I don't know, man. Their schedule, it's like, are they really that good? And then they play like this, and I have completely flipped my script on them. I'm like, okay, we need to be talking about Bishop Heelan. So great win for the Crusaders. MLC Floyd Valley falls just short, but whew, man, what a game. Webster City takes down Humboldt 26-7. Webster City goes into the postseason at 7-2. Humboldt at 5-4. That Webster City defense showed up when it mattered. Jackson Cherry, 31 carries, 234 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He also had 8 tackles. I basically looked at this game when it came to picking this game. Paul picked Humboldt, and I looked at it and I was like, what is Webster City giving up on the ground this year? They don't give much on the ground. If you're a rushing team and you're going against or Webster City, good luck, because this is a Webster City team that can handle you on the ground, and that's a huge part of their defense. And then if Jackson Cherry gets rolling on offense, then they're just a whole nother weapon. Jackson Griffith only goes 1 of 1 for 28 yards. That's the only thing that worries me about Webster City, is that if their rushing attack doesn't work, their passing attack's not there. So just kind of something you got to look at. But, Webster City, 369 rushing yards. Keegan Histler also had 102 rushing yards and a touchdown, along with what Jackson Cherry had. Cohen Madsen, just not enough. Just couldn't quite get it rolling. 13 carries, 44 yards, and a touchdown. He also passed for 65 yards, but couldn't do anything in the air when it comes to touchdowns. Humboldt still makes the playoffs, but Webster City gets a huge victory. And yeah, that's about as good as it gets for them. Got to give credit where credit's due to them. A huge game. Let's see. Scrolling down, is there any more? Everyone else kind of took care of business all across the board. I missed it up in Class 4A, so I'm just going to quickly circle back on it. Waverly Shell Rock defeated Marion, and I wanted to talk about that game real quick. I don't know how I missed it, but Marion went into the postseason. I'm going back to Class 4A, so excuse me while I quickly run back through. Waverly Shell Rock defeated Marion 31-19. Waverly Shell Rock was 21st in the RPI. I think they finished 21st. This is a team, I don't know how Paul and I didn't see it coming. Marion was number 9 in the RPI. And I thought, they could lose, but even if they do, they're not going to miss it. Well, they did miss it. Waverly Shell Rock goes in and beats Marion, and Marion gets kicked out. They go from 9th in the RPI to, I believe, the first or second team out. Waverly Shell Rock runs for 221 yards to Marion's 92. Marion had 186 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. This is a Go Hawk team Paul and I talked about all season long. They played the 4 toughest non-district games out of anyone, and then they hit district play, stumbled a little bit, but then got things rolling, and they're going to finish the year at 3-6, the best 3-6 team in the state by far. And they kicked Marion out. And if I'm Marion, I'm just like, I wonder if Marion went into that game knowing, hey, if we lose this game, we could fall out, because I was stunned. I thought for sure Marion was going to make it, but no, they're going home. And that was just, that was a big, wow, crazy. Let's jump down to 2A. Everything was pretty much taken care of across the board. A lot of, like I said, there weren't really many upsets. There were a couple good games. Des Moines Christian and Clarinda took off. Clarinda takes down Des Moines Christian, first round of the postseason. Clarinda, Carson Downey, 23 carries, 141 yards, and 4 touchdowns. How about this? I'm just going to read through the playoff games for the postseason. I'll give my quick thoughts on them, if you will, because every playoff game matters. So let's just do that. Forest City defeats Iowa Falls Alden 41-12. Comanche defeats West Burlington Notre Dame 42-14. Central Lyon, Georgia Little Rock takes down Okoboji 42-7. Clarinda beats Des Moines Christian 56-28. Western Christian struggle a little bit, but they get the job done against Esterville Lincoln Central. Keegan Ragenmortar, 19 of 24, 214 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 154 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Mantell, 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not a great game by Western Christian, but they get the job done, take care of business. Jessup takes down Crestwood. Crestwood was 3-6 coming in, so a good win for Jessup to hang on tight in that one. Mediapolis gets past Anamosa 28-21. The Bulldogs are 7-2 on the season. Kemper Catholic runs over top of Cherokee Washington 47-28. Kemper has not lost since losing their first 2 games of the season. This is a team to watch for. Brock batting 291 yards, 3 touchdowns, also ran for a touchdown. He is just a sophomore, ladies and gentlemen. Kemper Catholic is 7-2 and looks like a very tough team to beat in Class 2A. Our 2A game of the week, Mid Prairie defeats Northeast 49-18. It was, Brady Weber, 11 of 16, 162 yards and 5 touchdowns. He also had a touchdown on the ground. And then Hudson Ehrenfeld, a sophomore, 179 yards rushing, 1 touchdown. He also caught a touchdown. So plenty of offense for the Mid Prairie Hawks. They are on to the second round. Monticello defeats North Fayette Valley 42-13. New Hampton defeats West Marshall 41-21. PCM takes care of I-35 42-0. Roland Story over Clark 42-7. Grandview Christian takes down Sadell 34-32. That was a Week 9 game. Spirit Lake defeats Southeast Valley 49-0. Van Meter defeats Albia 56-7. Union Community takes down Waukon 21-7. This one had a lot of people talking. Of course, Union doesn't have stats in this game, but Waukon, if I'm not mistaken, was the winner of their district. So Union, a 4th place team, takes down Waukon. Good win for Union. They get Van Meter in the playoffs this week. And then West Lyon takes down Clarion Goldfield Dows 50-0. So pretty fun week in Class 2A. We'll jump down to Class 1A, where Pleasantville takes down West Branch 35-20. Brennan Dale, 134 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. And then Cale Sadell, 160 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. They run for 398 yards en route to a win. They were balling out over at the little Rose Bowl at Butch Peterson Field. So good for West Branch, good win over Pleasantville. Columbus Catholic defeats Pocahontas area 47-6. Emmitsburg defeats Ridgeview 20-8. Grundy Center takes down Cascade 50-40. Wilton takes out Woodward Ranger 49-21. Owen Hassel, 20 carries, 145 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Drew Keith, 140 yards, 5 touchdown passes. Cade Serrata, 3 catches, 57 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Wilton brought out the offensive weapons in that win over Woodward Granger. AHSTW takes down Hinton 21-0. I watched this game. Boy, what a good game. AHSTW just very good defensively. Scored 14 points in the 4th quarter to really pull away. Ugly game. Not really much offense to be spoken of in this one, but a good win for the Vikings. Regina downs Eddyville, Blakesburg, Fremont 48-20. Dyke New Hartford gets past Manson, NW Webster 51-6. MFL Marmac downs Hudson 55-3. South Hamilton gets past Denver 24-8. OABCIG over Shenandoah 49-14. Pella Christian over Ogden 43-0. Sigourney Kyoto takes down West Central Valley 42-7. Sumner Fredericksburg defeats South Hardin 31-26. I cannot remember for the life of me. It was I think it was a goal line stop by Sumner Fredericksburg to hang on and win this game. Noah Henderson, 9 rushes, 91 yards and a touchdown, 39 carries or 39 rushing yards and a touchdown. If you remember, their quarterback is out for the season, so Sumner Fredericksburg goes into the postseason having to kind of work around. Obviously, they hang on here. It's going to be tough next week, but shout out to the defense for coming up big for Sumner Fredericksburg. Holds off South Hardin 31-26. Trainer gets past West Sioux 31-13. Underwood gets past East Sac Valley 44-6. Those are your 1A playoff scores. We'll jump down to Class A. ACGC gets past Mount Air 34-18. Maquoketa Valley just takes care of business 57-21 over Columbus. I'd love to see rushing on this one. Lane McShane, yes, he did. 233 yards, 3 touchdowns, 77 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. The kid had 5 touchdowns. Why not? Caden Amagon for Columbus, 27 carries, 262 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Shout out Aiden Salo for Maquoketa Valley, 10 tackles, 2 for loss, and a sack. Maquoketa Valley recovers well off the loss to Starmont. Central Decatur defeats Earlham 14-13. Earlham scores late but can't do anything with it. And statistically, this game is very ugly. My goodness, 64 passing yards for Central Decatur, 38 for Earlham, 72 rushing yards for Central Decatur, 200. Earlham ran for 231 rushing yards and couldn't come away with the win. wow, what in the world happened in this game? I might have to do more research. Come back to you on Thursday. Earlham completely outgained Central Decatur, and the Central Decatur Cardinals are walking away with the victory. So how about that? That's just playoff football, baby. 46-3, East Buchanan takes down South Winneshiek. Akron Westfield gets past Tri-Center, 35-0. Lisbon takes down Northland, 14-6. Dakota Clark, 5 of 11, 18 yards, 1 touchdown, 27 carries, 1 touchdown. Matthias Cole, 14.5 tackles. This game was a defensive just slug match. Northland got up 6-0. Lisbon scores the next 14. I was proven wrong by Lisbon. I definitely think the offense has to be a little bit more there, but that's a good win for Lisbon, who I myself doubted going into the postseason. I thought Northland would take care of business here, but Lisbon gets the job done. Now they get ready for the next round of the postseason. A win's a win, that's for sure. Logan Magnolia holds off South Central Calhoun 26-20. Logan Magnolia is 8-1 on the season. Evan Rodden, 21 carries, 150 yards and a touchdown, 57 reception yards for a touchdown. They run for 294 yards total to hold off South Central Calhoun. Linville Sully gets past Pekin 28-6. Linville Sully is now down quarter down Harder, who just announced on Thursday or Friday that he is out for the year with an injury. And then Lucas Seek, who was their quarterback, he's out for the year because of an injury. So Linville Sully is just getting riddled with the injury bug, and now they have to work around that and try to make a deep postseason run. Just, you hate to see it for the Hawks. Madrid beats IKM Manning 45-7. MMCRU really takes care of business against Kingsley Pearson 50-14. Paul and I thought Bo Goodwin was going to take care of business. Bo Goodwin was shut down in a way, but he still threw for 322 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's Jonah Peterson of MMCRU who goes 13 of 19 for 304 yards and 6 touchdowns. That'll do it. That will win you a ball game. Kyler Bork, 6 catches, 131 yards and 3 touchdowns. Grant Prescott, 11 tackles, 2 of them for loss, and a sack on defense. Wow. MMCRU, good for you. Lake Mills defeats Nashua Plainfield. I think a lot of people thought Nashua was going to win this thing, but Lake Mills gets the job done. I think playing St. Ansgar and West Hancock really helped them out. And I know that sounds crazy, but once you see that competition, that almost could make you better. And in a way, I think those games really helped out Lake Mills, and that's a big win for them. St. Ansgar gets past Sibley Ocheyedan 23-6. Starmont defeats North Butler 17-0. Wapsie Valley over Danville 43-6. West Hancock holds off Galen Catholic 38-22. Woodbury Central over North Union 51-13. Those are your Class A scores from the first round of the playoffs. And on to 8-player. Audubon defeats Boyer Valley 30-6. Bedford over Fremont Mills 65-14. Iowa Valley defeats BGM 78-77. I give a little story time here. So my younger brother Tyler, who is currently a student at UNI, he's a junior. He always takes photos for us every week for the most part. And he was going to go back home to Grinnell, where obviously my parents are at. And he was going to go there for the weekend because I was going to pick him up and go to the Iowa game on Saturday. And he's like, can you find me a game around Grinnell? He's like, I don't care where it is. I just want to take photos. And I looked at BGM Iowa Valley, and it's in Brooklyn. And I'm like, you got to go to this game. And he's like, what about this game? And I'm like, this game's going to be, I literally told him, I was like, this is going to be a 60-60 game. Like, scores are going to be in the 60s. He's like, I don't know about that. He gives me text updates through the game. This game, there was no defense. If you wanted defense, you don't get defense. 78-77. This game was back and forth like you'd never believe it. BGM scored late with like 15 seconds to go, scored a deep bomb, but their kicker was 1 of 5 on the night or something like that, so they knew they couldn't kick the ball. So they went for 2 to try to win the ball game, and Iowa Valley held them off. Let me just read you some of these stat lines because they're actually kind of unbelievable. The freshman Nolan Kriegel went 8 of 10 for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 323 yards and 5 touchdowns, and then he caught 35 passing yards, and he scored a touchdown. This kid had 8 touchdowns. Are you kidding me? On the other side, Bo Burns, who is a sophomore, 25 of 45, 444 passing yards and 7 touchdowns. and he ran for 265 yards, and he scored 3 touchdowns. Bo Burns had 10 touchdowns on the night. Dominic Coleman, 9 catches, 203 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, you can't put into words how unbelievable this game was. And I get it. People say this isn't football. Who cares? It's still, they're playing football. It's just the defenses weren't there. That doesn't mean they weren't trying on defense. The defenses were still there. And for the people that say 8-player football is so bad and it's so stupid and they need to get rid of it, this is how schools play football. It's just how it is. Some schools can't field an 11-man team. What are you going to do? Just tell them, no, you can't play football. 8-man football is a vessel for these kids in the small schools to still be able to play football and still play it at a very highly competitive level. I don't care what the scores are. Most scores aren't like this, and people need to realize that. Yes, some winning scores will be up in the 70s or 80s because there's a big disparity between the really, really good 8-player teams and the 8-player teams that just don't have it. But there are other good games that are in the 30s and the 40s that look the same if you go up to 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A. These are anomaly type games. They only happen about once or twice a year. These high scoring, like even in the 70s. Yes, there can be 60-40 games or 50-40 games. But I don't know. It really irks me when people say that. Granted, the comments on the account, people are just kind of lame and they don't look at the people that post them. Spam accounts, just, high schoolers making fake accounts and doing stuff. People got to realize that. But that's a whole nother story that is annoying with Bound. But anyway, Iowa Valley, heck of a win for the Bears, or heck of a win for the Tigers over the BGM Bears. You'd hate to see a team lose this game. 78-77. What a win for those guys. I hope they took many ice baths. Bishop Garrigan gets past Janesville, 63-6. Cam over Southeast Warren, 75-12. Clarksville over Turkey Valley, 68-26. Colin Maxwell over Twin Cedars, 72-14. Don Bosco over Edgewood Colesburg, 62-22. Colonesco over Dunkerton. That wasn't a playoff game, but 60-22. Xeria EHK. I think I say that right, but I don't know. Someone needs to correct me on that. I think it's Xeria EHK. They defeat Glidden Ralston 30-16. Technically, two very competitive teams. Jamison Kilworth, 260 yards in the air, 3 touchdowns, 50 yards on the ground, and 1 touchdown. Good win for the Spartans. Gladbrook Rhinebeck defeats Montezuma 64-18. Central City, in my opinion, survives a scare with Key. Jeff Linder was at this game, and I kept checking the tweets, and I was almost ready to post a Key upset because, Key hung around for a long time. I'm like, are they going to hang on here? Central City pulled away late, but Key is a tough team. Mutterman's a good player, but the Wildcats hang on and get the job done. 52-28. They're 8-1 on the season. Woodbine falls to Lennox 60-28. Moravia wins a good game with Lone Tree 45-33. Remsen St. Mary's pulls away late against Harris Lake Park 52-23. Waco defeats Baxter 50-20. West Bend Mallard defeats Riceville in our 8-player game of the week 64-26. Landon Montag had a day, 214 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. He also passed for 169 yards and 3 touchdowns. So the kid had 8 touchdowns, solid 8 touchdown performance. And Winfield Mount Union defeats Belle Plaine 64-8. So very good week. Very good week of football. We're going to move on to our playoff games. I'm going to quickly run through those real quick. I'm going to grab a sip of water because I've been the only one talking for 40 minutes. Again, not good for a guy that screamed a lot at the Iowa game. So let's take a look at Class 5A. I'm just going to run through the playoff games. Take a couple glances here. Who got in, who didn't, maybe some of that. We'll run through it. Linmar. We'll go to Southeast. 4-5 Olympics on Southeast. Polk. The winner of that game will face the winner of Cedar Rapids Kennedy, 6-3 at 6-3 Cedar Falls. This is a rematch from a couple weeks ago when Cedar Falls defeated Cedar Rapids Kennedy. Does anything change? Again, we're going to bring that up a couple times. Does anything change between these two teams? Kennedy turned the ball over quite a bit in that loss to Cedar Falls. This is going to be a great game. It's our 5A game of the week. Sioux City East in Pod B. We'll go to Dowling Catholic to take on the Maroons. This game is at Williams Stadium, so it's at Des Moines East, which It's different because I thought it would have been at Valley Stadium, but they're going to play at Des Moines East, I guess. Dowling gets Sioux City East. Sioux City East coming off the loss to Johnston. Dowling looked pretty good against Sioux City North, coming off the loss to Southeast Polk. The winner of that game will play Johnston at 5-4 at Ankeny, 6-3. This is a rematch from a couple weeks ago, and I don't know who's going to win. This is our fan favorite game of the week because it was really tough to pick a lot of these games in Class 5A. I don't know, man. Johnston's got the offense. Ankeny's got the offense. Both teams got pretty good defenses. This game is going to be unbelievable at Ankeny Stadium. You're going to want to tune into this one. Winner most likely gets Dowling. Johnston-Dowling could be an interesting game. In Pod C, West Des Moines Valley makes the bracket and will go to Pleasant Valley, who is 8-1. Valley at 4-5. Sound familiar? It's because Valley took down Pleasant Valley last year to get to the Dome. Does it happen again? Ooh, I don't know. Valley's playing really well, man. You cannot put it past him. DeGroot is a very phenomenal quarterback. He's got a good arm. He's now settled in. Damon Head, that defense is playing well. Pleasant Valley is got to be mad about their draw. They have got to be mad about their draw. And it sets up a really interesting game, possibly in game 2, because Cedar Rapids Prairie, 5-4, goes on the road to Waukee at 7-2. Waukee has looked good this year, and then they've not looked good this year. The Waukee Northwest game, they blew it late, and then Southeast Polk, they just never were in. So this is an interesting game because Prairie loves to run the ball. Waukee's not terrible against the rush defense. I expect points in this game, but I think Waukee's defense should be able to put on enough. I'm not predicting games yet, but boy, we could get Waukee Valley in the game to make the postseason or game to make the Dome. And that's the crazy thing is that it sets up really well for Waukee to make the Dome. Not saying Waukee doesn't deserve to make the Dome. Not saying the Pleasant Valley doesn't. Not saying Valley, whatever. It's just this is an interesting bracket of teams, to say the least. And if we get Valley Waukee to go to the Dome, that'd be pretty crazy. And then in Pod D, 2 very good rematches. They knew what they were cooking with this one. Granted, the seeding kind of helped. But Ankeny Centennial will go on the road this time to Waukee Northwest. Northwest just defeated Centennial 17-7. 2 weeks ago. Waukee Northwest, I'm very high on the Wolves. I think this is a very phenomenal defense. Again, what did you learn from a couple weeks ago? And then Iowa City High, literally wash, rinse, repeat. They're going back to Bettendorf. Iowa City High goes and plays at Bettendorf for the second straight week. It's deja vu. It's just what happens. It's not many times you get, multiple chances to try to make things right. Can Bettendorf respond after the drubbing that was Iowa City High last week? Because Iowa City High should come in full momentum. Should be pretty interesting in Pod D. But either way, Centennial and Waukee Northwest could be going out east. Well, no, Northwest is higher. So Northwest would get the home field advantage. But I don't know. We'll see how everything shakes out in a way. We'll go to Class 4A, where Newton sneaks into the postseason and takes on Western Dubuque, 8-1. Boy, tough trip for Newton. Their tailback's been on a very good tear. I know that for sure. I think he had another almost 300-yard performance, if not 300 yards against Des Moines Hoover. This Newton's team is tricky. Western Dubuque only beat Mason City 35-21. I'm not putting it past them. That's a tough trip for Newton. At least you can just follow I-80 all the way down. We're not going to talk about travel distances because that's got me in trouble before. We're going to stay out of travel distances. But tough trip for Newton. Western Dubuque will be ready to play. Decorah goes on the road to North Scott. North Scott, Girardi's the man. If Girardi's hurt or has a bad game, North Scott's a little questionable. Decorah, good team, can run the ball. Should be a pretty good game. Sets up a possible Western Dubuque North Scott final. To get to the Dome, we've seen those two teams play before. That would be a lot of fun. Pod B, Lamar's goes to Lewis Central. This is a great draw for Lewis Central. Lamar's is 7-2. They're a good team. I don't think they're phenomenal. I think their schedule has been a little laid back, but Lewis Central looks to be one of the top teams in the class. And ADM road at Schleswig. I thought ADM got the home game, so apologies for that. ADM 6-3 goes to Denison. ADM's played the tougher schedule. I got to lean ADM in this game. I'll look at it more as the week goes on, but still happy to see Denison in the postseason for the first time in a long time. But ADM slips and has to go to Denison, which isn't a great drive for them. So again, these travel distances, as much as you complain about them, I'm just saying in general, yes, going on the road and traveling is a tough spot. So we'll see how ADM shapes up here. Norwalk at Glenwood should be a good one. They just played. They just played. So Norwalk's got to wake up, try again. We'll see what happens in that. Pella at Bondurant, another repeat. Pod C's just repeats, baby. What a time. Norwalk at Glenwood, Pella at Bondurant. Boy, this is a really interesting pod. Pella beat Bondurant just a couple weeks ago in Pella. Now they got to go on the road. Luke Hardman, you got two very good rushing attacks that can throw the ball a little bit. Ooh, this game is going to be good, man. If Titus comes back, it's going to be fun. Granted, Pella was beating Bondurant anyway when Titus got hurt last time. So we'll just have to see. But Norwalk, Glenwood, Pella, or Bondurant for an injured Bondurant for our team could make it to the Dome. That's just kind of how things work out. It's a fun Pod C. Keep an eye on that one. And then in Pod D, I love this second round matchup if this actually turns into it. Ballard takes on North Polk. The Bombers have reason to have high momentum, but North Polk has much higher reason. North Polk lost to Ballard a couple weeks ago, 7-6. They have to have that thing in the back of their mind. If you're Ballard, you're like, dang, I wish they would have beaten us the first time, and then maybe we beat them this time. But Ballard sneaks into the postseason and has to face North Polk. You did it once. You can stun the world and try to do it again. Indianola goes on the road to Cedar Rapids. Xavier, Indianola, just kind of a up and down team, but got into the playoffs after a win against Des Moines North. We knew they were going to get in because Pella or Gilbert was going to lose. And Xavier's just interesting, man. Their losses are to Williamsburg and Pella. And they're just, this Williamsburg win, they were a 2-point conversion away, and the Pella game, they weren't even close. So how much has this Xavier team improved as the season goes on? Statistically, I'd say pretty well. They do have a win over Western Dubuque under their belt. So I don't know, man. This is a very interesting game, but we could get Xavier North Polk in the second round. Sign me up for that, man. That is going to be such a good game. That's a heck of a travel distance for Cedar Rapids Xavier, because Xavier would have to travel to North Polk. Ooh, that'd be crazy, man. We'll go down to Class 3A. Harlan goes to Creston. Harlan 6-3. Creston is 9-0. These two teams played earlier in the season. Creston got away with a victory, an emotional game. Harlan only beat Knoxville 42-26. I didn't look at the stats on that game, but, just overall looking at it, you're like, that's closer than I would have thought it would have been. Harlan lost to Nevada big. Creston defeated Nevada. This is a very interesting game, but Creston gets it at home. They're very good at home. This is a team of destiny, it feels like. Bottom side of their bracket, the winner will face Nevada 7-2 or Webster City. Nevada goes to Webster City at 7-2. This is pretty much the big one because the Webster City, or with Nevada, they kind of got ran over top of by Hampton Dumont Cal, and they've started slow in their two losses. Nevada has to start fast in this game. They lost their wide receiver Kunsaroth in the game against Creston. So Nevada's got to pick up some pieces here. Kaysen Stevenson is good on the ground, but guess who's also good at stopping the rush? Webster City. This is a phenomenal football game. Nevada's got to stop Jackson Cherry. Webster City's got to stop Kaysen Stevens. The quarterbacks might come into play in this game, and if that's the case, I'll take King over the Webster City quarterback play because Webster City just doesn't pass the ball. So circle this game, man. This is going to be a phenomenal game between these two teams. And Nevada, I'm sure, would love a comeback and a try again at Creston to go to the Dome. Nevada has lost in the game to go to the Dome the last 2 years to the Harlan Cyclones. Fort Madison in Pod B goes to Solon at 8-1. Fort Madison sneaks in at 6-3. They jump over Grinnell. Grinnell was at the 17th, or Grinnell was 18th. He was either 18th or 19th. Everything happened that Grinnell needed to get in, and Grinnell didn't get in. Fort Madison jumps Grinnell because their RPI was 0.7 higher. And if you deep dive into it, Fort Madison played Centerville. Centerville is a 2A team that only played 8 games. Grinnell and Fort Madison's opponents had the same record, except one less loss for Fort Madison because Centerville only played 8 games. Centerville or Fort Madison gets in over Grinnell. As a Grinnell alumni and someone that saw a lot of Grinnell parents and a lot of Grinnell players, a lot of Grinnell coaches, they did not feel like they were given a fair advantage. And that's the thing with the RPI. The RPI is good in some cases, but the RPI doesn't account for that. It just says, oh, you have one less loss. Well, yeah, because they played 8 games. I'm not saying Fort Madison doesn't deserve to be in the postseason, but they played a 2A school. Grinnell went up and played a 4A school and didn't play any 2A schools. I'm just saying. I'm not going to get into it because I'm probably going to get in trouble for talking about it, but it's just one of those things that we're like, is that right? Like, is that really right? Davenport Assumption 7-2 has to go to West Delaware 6-3. This is a phenomenal game. This is going to be a great game. Assumption 7-2, West Delaware 6-3. West Delaware has picked things up here as the season's gone on. Assumption is a very good team. They play good teams above their caliber. Going to be a great game. We could get a West Delaware Solon matchup in the second round. We could get a rematch after Assumption beat Solon to start the season 28-7. I'm sure one of those teams would love it, but Solon looks like the hottest team in Class 3A right now. Should be a good one in Pod B. Humboldt goes to Williamsburg. Williamsburg has not looked amazing the last couple weeks, ever since the loss to Solon. Humboldt, lost to Webster City. It's not a great draw for Williamsburg. I love the game on the other side. Independence 7-2 takes on Mount Vernon 8-1. It's so crazy to me that at the beginning of the season, if you would have asked anyone, we probably would have said, yeah, Williamsburg, Mount Vernon, definitely going to be two teams at the Dome. Psych, they're both going to play to get to the Dome because I think Williamsburg's going to play Mount Vernon. And that is going to be an unbelievable game. I can tell you that right now. Ugh, sign me up. That's crazy, man. That is crazy that those two teams will have to face most likely to get to the postseason or get to the Dome. Pod D, Algona 6-3 goes to Sioux Center at 8-1. I think Sioux Center got in as like a 5 or a 4 seed. Much deserved. Sioux Center, I tell you what, these guys are good. They got some stars on their defense. Quarterback plays good. Algona and Alex Mensky, they can get hot at times. Should be a really interesting game. And then Bishop Heelan at 8-1 goes to Clear Lake 8-1. Obviously, Clear Lake fell to Humboldt last week, but they get back on track with a win this week. Circle that game, man. Clear Lake has to. I'm sure they put the loss in the rearview mirror, but you're getting a Bishop Heelan team that is coming in all cylinders on fire here. Should be a good one. So Algona, Sioux Center, Bishop Heelan, or Clear Lake, one of those teams is going to the Dome. So you got your, northwestern part of the state covered if you're up there, if you will. 3A is going to be a lot of fun. Class 2A, Pod A, Roland Story goes to Central Lyon, George Little Rock. Those boys have looked really good. Central Lyon has. Roland Story gets a tough draw. Clarinda, goes to Kemper Catholic. This is our Class 2A game of the week. Kemper Catholic is on a roll. Clarinda puts up points. This game should be high scoring if you think about it. Union upsets Waukon, and their reward, they have to go to Van Meter. 3-6 Union goes to Van Meter at 9-0. We'll see if Union can put together another upset run. Mid Prairie Wellman goes to PCM. Winner of that game takes on Van Meter in Pod B. Western Christian 7-2 will go West Lyon at 8-1. Bottom of that bracket, New Hampton takes on Spirit Lake. It is a shame. We are most likely going to get a West Lyon Spirit Lake game in the game to get to the Dome. I just feel like that is it's unfortunate. That's how it works out. I just feel like those two teams are two teams that are so deserving for the Dome, and one of them is going to miss it. Just kind of one of those things. Pod D, Jessup at 6-3 will go to Monticello 8-1. Nobody's talking about Monticello, man, and it just keeps happening. Their only losses to Mount Vernon. They've rolled through their schedule. They get the winner of Comanche and Mediapolis. Mediapolis hung on against Anamosa. Monticello should have clear eyes, full hearts to the Dome. Is that the saying? I'm not sure. Class 1A, Pod A, Pella Christian goes to Grundy Center. And at the bottom of the bracket, Dike New Hartford goes to Sigourney Kyoto. Boy, this is a stacked one. Grundy Center played Dike New Hartford in the beginning of the season and only won 7-6. I'm sure Grundy doesn't want to see Dike New Hartford. I'm sure Dike New Hartford would love to see Grundy Center. Sigourney Kyoto is a very good football team. They just keep working their way on up. They're going to be a fun team to watch if they get Grundy Center. Pod B, AHSTW goes on the road to Underwood. Good defense versus a very good offense. Winner of that game gets our Class 1A game of the week. Trainer 8-1 goes to OAB CIG at 7-2. Sumner Fredericksburg down its quarterback will go on the road to Emmitsburg. 8-1 Sumner Fredericksburg. Emmitsburg at 7-2. Good to see Emmitsburg back top. History of Iowa high school football likes to see that happen. Columbus Catholic 7-2 will go to South Hamilton at 8-1. Pod B, West Branch on the road at MFO Marmac at 8-1. Wilton on the road at Iowa City Regina, a rematch between those two teams. Owen Hassel did not play in that game against Regina, so we'll see what happens in that one now that those two teams are back together. In Pod A, Lake Mills at St. Ansgar, that's a rematch. East Buchanan at Lisbon. Lisbon did not get any favors with their draw. MMCRU takes on Woodbury Central. Logan Magnolia takes on Akron Westfield in Pod B. Pod C, West Hancock 8-1 at 8-1 Starmont. This is a shame that this is a first round game. Or a second round game. It just stinks. This is such a good game, and my Wi-Fi is going out, so I'm trying to roll this along. This is just frustrating because this is such a good game between two very good teams. Maquoketa Valley at 7-2 takes on Wapsie Valley at 8-1. Pod D, Central Decatur 6-3 takes on Madrid 9-0. Linville Sully 8-1 goes on the road to ACGC at 9-0. Wi-Fi is going out. We're going to try to finish this thing out quickly. Pod A, an 8-player, Moravia at Winfield Mount Union. Waco at Donsko. B, Azuria EHK takes on Bedford. Lennox at Audubon. West Bend Mallard 7-2 takes on Cam 9-0. Remsen St. Mary's 9-0 goes to Bishop Garrigan. That's a weird one at 8-1, and then in Pod D, Iowa Valley 7-2 goes to Clarksville at 10-0. Winner of that game takes on Gladbrook Rhinebeck 8-1 at Central City 8-1. Clarksville could end up playing Gladbrook Rhinebeck again. My Wi-Fi is going out. I apologize. The back half has probably been so choppy, but I am tired. I appreciate everyone for watching. Have a good week. Paul and I will be back on Thursday to talk about these postseason games. Thanks for listening and watching to Bound to Talk Football. I'll see everyone on Thursday.